All right, guys. So the big news is that our very own Paul has today announced that he is, in fact, Top Gear USA Stig. In fact, you are the Top Gear USA Stig for not one, not two, but 8 years, Paul.
Yeah, and I guess we should be very, very clear. I am the ex-Stig. I am not the Stig going forward, but
Right.
I was the Stig from the NBC pilot show all the way through the entire run on the Discovery Channel.
So you worked with Tanner, you worked with the boys.
Rutledge and
Rutledge,
Adam. Yeah,
yeah.
Rutledge with Adam Ferrara, that's right.
So
But Adam and Rutledge maybe now know who I am. They didn't know the entire time.
yeah, you told me that you had like 6 people in the whole world that knew that you were the Stig. Tell me.
That's right.
Your wife knew, but your kids didn't know.
Yeah,
Your
parents
dad
didn't know.
Brother didn't know.
No, mom, dad, didn't know. So it's a very strange thing because you had to keep the circle very, very close. It was a weird life. It feels very strange to talk about it right now, to be honest with you, because I'm so used to this being this sort of buried secret in my life. But since I wasn't able to continue with the new show, and of course, coincidentally, I just wrote a book. I just thought, why not use it, and make the most of it, and just get rid of this secret because I've been lying to people for 8 years. It sounds like really cool, like wow, you get to be like this, secret agent kind of thing, and that part of it was kind of cool. But the reality is, you're lying to almost everyone you know, and so that's why we kept the circle, down to 6 people.
So was this contractually in some place written down that said you had to not tell people?
Well, basically, it isn't written like that. How it's written is if this gets out, you lose the job.
Oh.
So they incentivize you,
Yeah.
and you want to keep it. And it's funny. I got a text from Cody Loveland, who's the guy. I've got a lot of texts lately, and he's the guy I ran the Pikes Peak car with just
Right.
like a year ago. And he goes, "Damn, dude, you're good at keeping secrets. 8 years." And I'm like, 8 years, So it's that kind of thing. But it was a really cool thing to get to do, an absolute honor and a privilege. It was great to work with the BBC. It was great to work with, and things came out of it. Like it's not a secret that I do stuff with the Grand Tour. I did stuff with Top Gear UK, never being the Stig. But just driving like their camera cars and doing things like that. And that all came out of being the Stig. So I did get some benefits out of it besides that.
And by the way, guys, Paul is our expert race car driver. And today on TFL Car, he's got the newest episode of Hot or Not, where you took the Honda Civic SI around the track and decided whether it was hot or not. And let's talk about your new book. So why don't you kind of show them, if you guys want to learn how to drive a car like Paul. Okay, maybe not.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, that's kind of the whole thing. Why settle for good when you can be great? Not that I'm always great, but I have my moments. And I did that because I've been driving for 20 years professionally and teaching people. Part of the Stig job was teaching celebrities how to drive. So there's 30 or so celebrities that I coached, and then I coach people in my regular life too as a racing driver. So I've spent a lot of time teaching people how to drive, and the one epiphany or truth that came out of it after so many years of doing it is that anyone can be a great driver. But rarely do people have the motivation. People want to say, oh, my reflexes weren't fast enough. It's like, it's none of that. It's not a lick of that. Great driving is simply desire. You just spend enough time around the right people on the right tracks and the right cars, and you're rational and motivated, and you can be great. And the book's all about that.
Yeah, the book's about that. And guys, I'll do a link below. So if you want to buy it, it's available on Amazon.
Yep.
And I'll also
Optimum Drive.
Yeah, I'll also probably do a link above. So click and check it out yourself. It's a great book, and it really does get into kind of the mentality and the skill set of being a great race car driver. But let's talk about being the Stig. I want to know about being the Stig. So first of all, how'd you get the job?
Well, I knew Tanner. I've known Tanner Faust, who was one of the original hosts of the show. I've known Tanner for 20-some years, a long time. And Tanner, a lot of people know this. Obviously, we're in Colorado. Tanner also is from Colorado. His dad still lives in Denver area. And so I've known Tanner a long, long time. And then Tanner was one of the original hosts for what was an NBC pilot. So the big thing in the beginning, this is 2008, was going to be primetime NBC Top Gear USA. And so there's a pilot shot. Tanner was the only host that stayed. It was originally Adam Carolla.
Yep.
And
I remember that. I remember that.
yeah, what was the other guy's name? Oh, I just spaced on it now. But he was a guy from like home improvement show.
Right.
But he was on there as well. It'll come to me. Someone will text it in the comments probably. But so we shot a pilot. So they did a scout or a search, a test for a Stig then. And so I caught wind of it through Tanner. And Tanner said, hey, if you can come out to LA, we're going to do 2 days. We're going to run like 50 guys. And it was super intimidating because they didn't tell you anything. You came in, you just did it by yourself. You didn't see anybody else. But I knew there were IndyCar drivers, there were stunt drivers, there were all these. They were like, it's an impressive list. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get this job, right? And then this is the best part. And I almost ought to pull Tanner up on the phone for this, but Tanner took each guy around for like a lap to show him the track that they had randomly set up on El Toro military base, which is where we had the Top Gear track and everything. And Tanner and I did the Hot Wheels jump practice there too. So got a lot of history at the El Toro facility, Marine base. And so what happened was that they'd bring you in and you had like maybe about 45 minutes, and Tanner would take you around for this lap out on this. And you guys have ever done any sort of track stuff where you're on a runway? It's very hard to get landmarks and everything. And then they put cones out there, but they put cones like every 150 yards. Like it was very hard to connect the dots somewhere. And it cut back over itself and went back around these taxiways. One lap he gave you in a Mazda 3. And here's the thing about it. He scared the hell out of me the whole lap. He drove like a lunatic. Had the thing sideways everywhere. I didn't know which way he was going to go because you couldn't see the next cones. And then he did this lap and he goes, okay, here's a Mustang. Go do a lap time. And I'm like, which way do I go from here? I wasn't even.
And you had a set of lap time, right?
I set a lap time. So it was a Mustang and then an Aston Martin.
Okay.
And on the Mustang, I went around and I got lost. Like, not terribly, but a little bit lost.
Yeah.
And so I come in and I'm like, how was that? And I'm like, I got lost. And he's like, well, the rules are everyone gets one lap. The Aston Martin, I went out and I absolutely somehow remembered everywhere it went, didn't make any mistakes. He comes in, I come in, like, how was that? He's like, well, you did pretty good. We've got a bunch of other guys to test. Didn't give anything away. I got a call back a week later. He said in the Aston Martin, I was 2 seconds faster than everybody.
Wow.
And it was supposedly 50 guys. So that was really, really cool to hear. And I got the job. And it was really funny because they specifically said that they wanted someone that lived in LA, and I live in Colorado. So I had actually used a fake LA address. So they would even let me into it. And then they found out that I lived in Colorado and they were okay with it, So then I had the gig.
You got to do what you got to do to
I
get the gig.
I know. And and I couldn't exactly move my family to LA, which I probably should have done many years ago. I would have made a lot more money in the film business.
Hey, we love Colorado.
But Colorado is absolutely
Not
beautiful.
a lot of skiing in LA.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Paul. By the way, we're going to get to your questions as well. So we'll have people ask questions at some point, Tommy, as always. So let me ask you this: give me some fun kind of. How did that work? Did you fly in and do a bunch of cars for the episode? So they had a bunch of cars.
There were all sorts of versions of it. I mean, there was flying in for a specific thing, like sometimes they do races, and when they do races, sometimes at some particular stop on one of the races, and anyone familiar with the show, you're like, yeah, they'll do a particular challenge, and a lot of times that challenge involved doing something against the Stig.
Yeah, so that was you.
So that would be me, like shooting in. But then there would also be a whole week of actual testing that we would do of a whole bunch of cars. So if we had a whole season, we'd go to El Toro. They'd get a star trailer, and it would be a 2-compartment star trailer. One side would be whoever the celebrity was going to come in for star in a reasonably priced car.
Yeah.
And I had the other side, and so I sat in that trailer all day. And then they come knock on the door, and they'd go, 5 minutes, Stig. And you'd go, I'd put all my stuff on, and the trailers were all blacked out, so no one could see. The door was always locked. I'd sit in there and do push-ups and sit-ups and buy stuff off Amazon. That's basically was my existence. And so that was almost all of the day. And then they'd have the car rigged up. And like the rigging for the cars, no offense, Ian, the rigging for the cars takes a long time, especially when they do a lot of POV. And so they'd have to take all this kit from car to car to car. So there was a ton of sitting around. Then I'd get in a car and they'd go out and I would just do a lap, very similar to what we do. But it would be Lamborghinis and Ferraris and whatever else. Rally Fighter was really fun, all sorts of cars, and I would do it like that. So it was these huge combinations. I flew all over the U.S. over the course of the 8 years, and I did it under fake names.
Oh gosh.
Someone else renting around a car for me, dropping off the gear, random spots. We do gear drops. This is like being a drug dealer, you know, like random spot. They would drop the gear in a duffel bag. I would go pick it up when no one was around. I would take it back to the hotel. Then I would go out to my just very plain Jane car in the morning. I would drive out to a location a few miles from the track. I'd put everything on in a park or something like that, no kidding. And then I would drive to the gate, and I was on the cell phone going, I'm not signing a waiver, you know, so make sure the gate guard knows that and they let me in. So the track or whatever, I'd come in and I would leave as a Stig. And I would wear the whole setup the whole day in there unless I was able to sequester myself off like a mile away from everybody. And then I would always keep an eye because people would come look. I had people chasing me out of El Toro before, and I had to lose them. So I had all sorts of things happen where people were trying to find out who I was. And 8 years of that. And again, it is kind of fun in the moment, but the worst part is I couldn't tell anybody what was happening. Tanner was the only guy I could talk to. So he and I would have conversations and things, and I would be like, oh man, you should see what happened this time.
Which brings up the question, which always kind of confounded me. You know, Top Gear UK had 3 guys who were amateur reviewers and such, and they needed a race car driver. Top Gear USA had a professional race car driver, Tanner. So why did you need, in effect, another race car driver? Why?
Because I wouldn't have had a job.
I know, but you see what I mean?
No. It was always this kind of weird sort of thing with Tanner and I, and we just happened to be very good friends. So it was never anything between us personally.
Like a formula they used.
But what it was the show always had a struggle with Tanner because Tanner was such a great driver and is such a great driver. Where it was always awkward with Tanner, not with me, but with the other hosts. You know, more than anything. So I would sort of be the litmus test. And there was one really fun thing, by the way, that I got to do is, and I guess I can say this now because I don't think anyone really knows this, but one of the cars Tanner drove as the Stig, and it was his rallycross car. And so he drove that car on the timed laps. I wasn't allowed to drive the car, and he set the track record with it. So the next year, a guy brought in a turbocharged Ariel Atom, and I was able to beat the track record as the Stig in that car. I felt really good about that. Sorry, Tanner, but it did feel good. So that was really funny. So there was always that, and Tanner is a great driver, fantastic driver, and actually he's a bit of the subject in my book when I'm talking about guys that I've coached that are amazingly good. He's one of those guys, you know. So he's a fantastic guy. But it was always kind of weird. But they always figured out a way to handicap him. That was the way that they did it.
Yeah, they had handicap.
They put him in a worse car. They put him in a bad situation. And that gave the other guys like a level playing field to actually have a chance at a somewhat legitimate victory in any of the challenges they did.
So one of the things you got to do was coach the stars, right?
Yeah.
So who was like the best driver? Who was like the most natural person that you dealt with?
There were a few. Yeah. I'll say the guy, and this was the NBC pilot, so this never even aired. Never even aired. David Hasselhoff.
David Hasselhoff. Well, it makes sense. Yeah, the Hoff with Kit.
The Hoff.
With Kit and the whole history.
All right, so I'm not going to go into too much detail in fear of
you don't want to burn any bridges.
Well, I don't have any bridge to burn. I'm worried more like a legal thing. But remember that guy was rumored and confirmed on video, so I'm not saying anything, but there was some substance things going on with that gentleman. He was a bit of a drinker.
Right, at some point, yeah.
I was dealing with that during it. Okay. Yeah, so the thing was, though,
he was talented. We
had the 2 trailers. And I used to meet everybody, and they'd come over, and I would have the visor down, but I would just crack it so they could hear my voice. So I would talk to them, and so he came over, and he was like really nice and very normal and everything. He went back to his trailer, went into the bathroom in the trailer. I heard it. Came back over, and he was shot out of a cannon all of a sudden. So we then went to go on the track, and I'm trying to teach him the track, and he was amped up and having way too much fun and all of that.
That's fast.
Then he went and did a lap time like an hour later, and it was a solid lap time around the track. I was amazed. I'm like, he's going to crash, you know. Luckily, it was a big runway with lots and lots of runoff.
Was there anybody you were terrified of?
No one I was terrified of. I taught a lot of people to drive manual transmissions, for instance, because our car was a manual. So I teach them to drive a manual. I had a I always have fun teaching people how to drive, and it was no different. You had Buzz Aldrin, you know, I mean, he's a legend, right? He's guy walked on the moon for, you know, and I got to sit there in the car with him. And then on the other hand, you'd have like, different celebrities from either the music industry or the movie industry or whatever, and TV shows and all that. And they were all really cool, really fun. No one was a jerk. No one had a bad attitude. Everyone was total blast, and we had a great time. And everyone, even when they come in, like you could probably get Ed Bagley Jr. who swears he hates cars and cars are bad. And
I remember that.
But
I remember that episode. Yeah,
but everyone loves driving around a track. It's crazy fun to do. So it was you're putting them in this sort of fantasy situation, and you can see that on the UK show or any of the shows. They really enjoy the track driving, and so they're fun to teach.
Well, do we have some questions that we want to? I'm sure there's a lot of lively discussion up there. So, Tommy, what are some questions?
What advice would you give Hammond?
Know your limits.
Now you're friends with Clarkson, right?
I know all of them, and they're all really, really good guys, and they're all very good drivers. But they're very good, in the context of guys that do TV shows. They drive incredibly well, and so they do a very good job. But you got to be, you've got to be careful, and they are. I'll tell you the thing that's interesting with working with them is that they thrive on pushing things to the very edge. So that type of thing, while that's over what's ideal to happen, to have a crash like that when someone's getting injured,
now,
they like flirting with that.
Yeah, we're talking about the recent crash that Hammond had where basically...
With the Rimac.
Yeah, where he rolled it, it's an electric car, it caught on fire, and he's lucky to escape with only an injury to his leg.
That's right, that's right. And those cars are tough. And I think, to me, like to drive a car like that, they're incredibly fast in a straight line, but you look at that car and you think, it looks like a LaFerrari, it probably weighs as much as a LaFerrari. It weighs twice as much as a LaFerrari because of the batteries in it. So while it accelerates as well as a car like that, it doesn't brake or corner like a car like that.
And you have to respect that.
And you have to remember that when you're in the car. And I'm not saying that's what did happen, and Hammond's he's such a cool guy and we talk about motorcycles all the time because he loves talking about bikes, and super guy, and James May is amazing, and Jeremy is fantastic. So love those guys.
Other questions, Tommy?
What's your favorite track?
Nürburgring, easy. Nürburgring.
What's the car you drove on it?
BMWs, because I used to do training for BMW there.
Yeah.
So lots of M cars.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
not with the E on them.
I know, not the
that
hybrid.
wouldn't make a lap. Yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
Doing what?
Racing.
Racing.
Yeah.
1989. Started racing professionally.
Right, now you're British originally, right?
Born in England, yeah.
So
Windsor, England, yeah.
Yeah, you're British, and you started your career in the UK.
No, well,
kind of, sort of?
No, I started my career in France, actually,
Right.
but I moved here when I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
With my family, we came over, and so I grew up in the States,
Right.
and I went back to Europe to race when I was older. So typical story.
So you've raced a lot of different cars, and you've tutored a lot of different race car drivers.
Absolutely, yeah. And I still do. I mean, that's a big part of me writing Optimum Drive was I love coaching.
Show the book again.
And I have kind of my own methodology that I've used and I've developed over all those years and all those experiences coaching people, and that's what made me want to write this in the first place. I kind of hoped someone had written, I think I told you that, I'd hoped someone had written a book like this and I wouldn't have to do it. Yeah. And so I was out reading every driving book out there, and I'm like, no one ever really put down what you mentioned, sort of the psychology of how important what's in your head is when you drive a car. It's not the mechanics of driving. Anyone can drive.
Right.
But why is so few people actually great at it? So that's what I put down.
What else?
Have you ever raced Ben Collins?
No, I haven't. Maybe in the future, now that he might know about me.
But tell me the story about the previous Stig. The guy, the black Stig.
Okay, so yeah, Perry McCarthy. So Perry McCarthy, he has a kind of a cool book called Flat Out, Flat Broke.
Yeah.
And Perry is this old school, he's back, any of you that are Formula One fans, sort of the Johnny Herbert, Damon Hill kind of era of Formula One. And he got into Formula One but never had a dollar to his name. He sort of scraped his way to the top, and he was this very rough and tumble, ready to fight kind of northern Englishman, And so I met him at this driving program when I was the Stig, after he was the black Stig on the original Top Gear, and he was trying to prod me like, oh, do you know anyone on the U.S. show? And I was like, yeah, And I'm like, I am the Stig. He wanted my job. He was trying to get my job. So I was having to dissuade him, like, you don't want to be on the U.S. show. Don't call anybody.
Now, as you guys know, Top Gear USA ran and was canceled, I think about a year and a half ago, and there's a new one coming.
Yes, there's a new one coming at the end of this month. Yeah, so they recast the whole thing.
Recast it, and you could have been the Stig, but you had enough.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I had enough. It was just. I think there. Yeah, you're right. On a certain level, I've 8 years of keeping the secrets pretty tough. I think that's longer than Ben Collins did it or anyone had to do it. So that was hard. Again, it's just there's aspects of it that are very negative, and that gets hard to deal with. But it was just more like I just kind of felt like I was sort of attached, especially to Tanner, to those guys as part of that crew. I was the fourth host, the guy that just didn't talk.
You become like
so
part of the family.
when they got sort of jettisoned, it kind of left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, I guess. And again, BBC's been nothing but super to me, and they've been really, really great. And I just kind of made that decision, especially with the book coming out, that I'm gonna take this and see what I can get out of it.
We'll do one more here.
Okay.
Yep.
Best advice for someone looking to try to get into racing, either as a driver or an engineer.
Well, let's get your hands on cars, in either case, whether you need to drive or whether you want to engineer, you've got to get out to a track, and whether it's a local short track to learn how cars work, whether it's going to a trade school at night and going to short tracks on the weekends, whether it's if you want to be a driver, the best way to do it is karting, and I'm not talking about indoor karting, which is good, but it's a very entry-level step. You should very quickly graduate to outdoor karting like IMI, where our test track is. Great karting facility, and there you can learn the tools of the trade and find out whether not only, again, people want to say talent, but as I was saying earlier, it's not really about talent, it's about desire, how bad you want this. Are you willing to give up everything in your life and sleep in your car at a racetrack to get a drive in a car the next day because you put every cent of your hard-earned dollar into it?
Guys
That's
like that.
That's what racing is. I had my share of that. I scraped together a construction job one summer, saved up $5,000, and went to Europe and entered a competition. Just like blew all my money.
And then you better win.
And luckily I did pretty well, and here I am today. So, but that's what it takes, and that's what I think. Going and not buying an expensive car and doing track days. Let me just say that very clearly. Worst use of your time if you want to be a professional driver.
Yeah, good advice. And Paul, let me ask you this: when you were the Stig, were there any moments that you can recall where you were like terrified for your life, or where you got so close to the edge that
every single damn time?
Because we talked about this. Sometimes they let you do like crazy stuff.
You remind me of something really funny. So here's the funny thing. Remember my little circle of 6 people?
Yeah.
I didn't have anyone to talk to really on set about what I was doing.
Yeah, how far you were pushing it.
So they just told me to do stuff and I did it. And there wasn't really an opportunity to say no. And I will say that none of the things that they asked me to do were like stupidly, deadly dangerous, or I wouldn't have done them.
Right.
But every single one of them, I would have loved to have a little practice. They would say, we need you to go slide that car up on the banking in 4th gear, which is 120 miles an hour, and then come down and do this perfect little stop. And you do this stuff one take, and that was the hardest part about the job, was that I didn't get to go out and really like sight things, practice things. It was all about just, time is money in the film business. And so they just had you allotted like, okay, we need you to go do that thing we just asked you to do over the radio.
So it's one of those things that in when you think about it, you're like, there was this, I'll give you an example. When I was a TV reporter, right?
Yeah.
I went into the story where this guy had big cats in his house. And I turned on that big light.
You told me the story when we were in the Hellcat together.
And this guy's got this like
tiger.
Bengal tiger that's running around on a leash. And I'm thinking to myself afterward, what the hell was I doing in a room with a Bengal tiger?
I was always in the room with the Bengal tiger.
Yeah. So
And
it's like that.
It was always a new tiger. So you'd like befriend the one tiger, and then the next day they'd have a new tiger. And you're like, this might be the sketchy tiger. So it was always things like that. And it was really fun, like super proud to do those things afterwards, but you're always like, wow, that was pretty sketchy. And there were times like I would actually say something on the radio because there was something happening. I had car breakages. You're doing those cheap car challenges. Those cars break
all the time.
10 times a day.
Yeah.
And it might be in the middle of something, that it breaks. And so then you'd have to like, I'm going to hit the other hosts or whatever, and you'd have to do something. sort of last minute to catch the car. There were so many catches, so many the near miss count is astronomical. But it was always okay because, you know, near misses don't count, right?
I'd love to see the outtakes. And so you're good friends with, obviously, the old Top Gear host, right? Hammond, Clarkson, and May.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything with the Grand Tour?
Yeah, I'd still go and do stuff with Grand Tour, and hopefully this doesn't change anything.
Stunt driving?
Yes, exactly. And like I said, very often I drive camera cars for them and do all that stuff and just advise on things and do that stuff and sort of hopefully be that voice of reason that I was just talking about not having when we were doing the other doing the Stig stuff. So
let's wrap this up. Hey guys, thanks for watching, and I want to do a shout out first to the manufacturers. If you guys are watching, Paul's doing our Hot or Not episodes, and right now we have our fastest car is a Corvette.
Yep.
And we still haven't really gotten our hands on any crazy fast cars.
No,
right?
we need some
some seriously
Yeah.
fast vehicles. I'm talking McLaren. I'm talking
Yeah.
Ferraris. I'm talking Lamborghinis. I'm talking even a GTR. And we could go under a minute. I think you can go under a minute.
Yes.
So if you guys are listening out there, give us one of those cars, and let's see if you could be at the top of the track record board. And it's really cool because at this point we've done something like, what, 30 cars almost?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so if you watch those videos, what I really love about the fact is that you've got a professional race car driver who is the former Stig, who
They can now talk.
who set the records, who talks about the performance of the car, how it handles. And you know, I'm really thrilled to be able to do that with you. So thank you. And then, of course, let's do one more shout out to the book, Optimal Drive.
Optimum Drive, yep.
Optimum Drive.
Barnes and Noble, everywhere.
Everywhere else. We'll do
Kindle,
a link. We'll do a link
iBooks.
below. So click on it. And if you guys want to know how to drive a car fast, there's the way that you learn it. And it's here. It's not here, right?
It's got to
both.
be everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what this book is. It's about all of it, not just about the mechanics of driving a car, which is just a tiny bit of it.
Well, thanks for watching. And remember, check out TFLcar.com for more news, views, and, of course, real-world reviews. And Paul?
Should I fold my arms?
Yeah, that's right.
For the last official time.
I'm not going to say, you say it. On this bomb
Shell, yeah.
we say goodbye. Bye, guys.